Good afternoon. Welcome to Public Works Committee. I am Council Member Joe Buscaino. Can I say order in the court or not? I am so thankful that Council President Herb Wesson has assigned me to this committee and to chair it. As we all know, Public Works plays a critical role in the city. Whether it's tree trimming, street lighting, fixing sidewalks, broken lights, talk about the quality of life in the city. And I'm so humbled and honored to serve as your chair. Just to note, last week we met with the Bureau heads along with Commission President Alarcon and my assigned Public Works Commissioner Mendoza. And just an opportunity for us to kind of get to know each other and to be able to explain the ins and outs of each department and each bureau. And as a senior lead officer, I've worked hand in hand with the employees for each respective bureau. And I so look forward to working with each and every one of you to improve the quality of life of this great city. And I want to take a minute to introduce my staff, my policy director, Jenny Chavez, sitting to my right, and my legislative aide, Kevin Bingham. Kevin, raise your hand. So if my staff could be of any assistance to each and every one of you, please let us know. With that, for those who would like to submit a public comment, please be sure to fill out a card, and I'll be taking public comment first from each item. And I'd like to, we've received a request from the City Attorney's Office to continue item 3 until further notice. So, Mr. City Clerk, if you can kindly note that. And now joined by my colleague, Councilmember Paul Krikorian. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. And with that, let's get started. So, item number 1, please.
Okay. Item number 1 is a presentation by the Bureau of Engineering relative to the process for street vacations and temporary closures.
Mr. Moore. Good afternoon. Gary Moore, City Engineer. I'm joined today at the table with Michael Cantor, Deputy City Engineer, and Edmund Yu, the guru of street closures and vacations. And Edmund is also our group manager of our land development group. But Edmund is really the key, along with his excellent staff here in the Bureau of Engineering. Councilman Buscaino and Councilman Krikorian, welcome to Public Works Committee. And it's great to have both of you. And we're very pleased to be here. Item number 1 on your agenda in the new committee. In the city of Los Angeles, it's, as Edmund has put it so well, most of the streets in the city of Los Angeles are actually not owned by the city, but we have an easement over them to use them. And Edmund likes to use the example of it being as a renter of an apartment unit. The city rents the apartment, and the city and the public have the right to use that street as long as we continue to have that easement. And when we want to give up that easement, or they call it a vacation process, then we give that use back to the property owners. And so we'll talk a little details about what a vacation is and then the procedures for that. And the other part is a temporary closure of a street. And that really governs, back in the 1990s, laws were taking away the authority from the cities to actually for permanent or temporary closures. And they went and it now falls under the state laws, in particular the State Vehicle Code, Section 21. In 1995, the City Council went ahead and took action to adopt these procedures and also set some procedures inside the city. And on closures, for instance, most of the time it has to do, initiated by the council office and is asked for Bureau of Engineering to investigate. Usually, there's criminal activities associated with some of the street closures or alleyways. And we then go ahead and set out and do a report, work with key departments on this. And obviously, Los Angeles Police Department is probably the most important one. They have to confirm that there's serious criminal activities in the streets to justify the closure, and it's called a temporary closure. You're actually only allowed to close the street for 18 months, but you can actually do, I believe it's 8 extensions each of 18 months in this process. So it actually comes back many times. We then will prepare a report. It will come through this committee here on to City Council as the normal procedure. Once the City Council has approved this decision to close the street, it normally requires that these gates be installed if it's an alleyway on each side of it, and has to be done within 6 months. And once again, usually resident groups or community groups are then tasked or usually involved in this, and actually the city does not provide these gates or pay for these gates. And on top of this, the residents or community groups have to get 2 additional permits. One is a revocable permit to install the gates, and one is a B permit to make sure that the gates are have adequacy to be installed in the public right-of-way. So at that point, once again, as Department of Transportation, Fire Department are reviewed and are involved in the review of this process, and finally, when those are approved, the gates can be installed. Right now, the city does not fund those gates or those permits. So that's it in a real, and Edmund or Mike can go into greater detail, or we can open it up to questions on the closure, a temporary closure process.
On the vacations, what are some of the public benefits of initiating a street vacation?
What happens is, you know, the city, many years ago when it had a lot of large parcels, it was very easy to develop. You know, you could find a nice couple acre site to develop. And for instance, let's take a school, for example. Plenty of open land, and you could find space for schools. But now, as we've built out so much, it's very difficult to find land. So for instance, a school might build on opposite side of an alleyway. And what they want to do is that take that alleyway, it doesn't impact traffic flow because there's streets around it, and that access is no longer needed because since they're the property owner of each side. So what we do is we say we vacate the street away from, we give up our easement, vacate that easement, give it back over to the property owner, and then they're able to build over that new contiguous piece of property. So let's say there was a property on the left, property on the right in the alley, so now you've got this nice contiguous piece of property. So it allows for those types of projects. Another example was the Los Angeles Police Administration building right across the street. We had some vacations involved in that process. So it benefits, and what it's very important that there's always the traffic and safety is not compromised by doing these vacations. And Edmund or Mike, anything you want to add on vacation? Go ahead.
Essentially, once the determination is made that this street easement is not needed for vehicle or pedestrian access, then we just go through a procedure to vacate that and return it to the underlying owners. So the owners that have the fee title to that easement area, they would get that land returned. For example, a residential alley, you might have 20 lots where each lot gets a piece, gets a half of the alley on one side, and the other half gets the other half. And it's presented initially to council with a set of conditions. We typically will condition it so that whatever needs to be done in order to release this easement, there could be things like sanitary sewers or storm drains. There could be things within that easement. So there's a lot of procedural things that the Bureau of Engineering does to make sure that vacation can proceed. And then once the council approves those initial conditions, that applicant.
Are there any fees involved? If so, where does that money go to, and how much is it for?
We recover all our costs in the street vacation process. We essentially take an initial deposit, we open a work order, and all of the staff time that's charged against that vacation, the applicant pays for that.
When that money goes, where does the money go to?
It would reimburse the general fund for our salaries.
Okay. And the range of costs is usually what we see as $10,000 to $25,000, because you also are in contact with the planning, Department of Transportation, gas company, telephone. Once again, you might have other utilities like Mike mentioned, the sewer, water. So there's other things. Edmund, anything else?
Yeah, one thing I may want to add as far as the public benefits is that After the vacation, the land will become private property. So the property owner, then they would have to pay property tax on those.
I see.
So there's a certain incremental increase for the overall the city benefits by vacating the land.
And what's the average time? As we know, in the city, as we all know, notoriously moves slow. So what's the average time from beginning to end on the process of a street vacation?
Basically, the vacation is like a two-phase process. The first phase is go to city council for approval, and that approximately is between 9 to 10, 12 months time just to go to city council for an approval.
Can we expedite that in any way?
Normally, we have to work with other city agencies and departments, and yeah, we always advise customer and applicant that if they can work with other agencies directly, or if they can approach the utility company directly, so we have the information as soon as possible, yeah, then we can speed up the process. So we are kind of like on a disadvantage. We have to get information from other agencies before we can move forward on
Then
that.
you said there's a second phase.
The second phase is after the city council's action normally is in the form of like a conditional approval. Then the applicant, they will have up to 2 years to deal with the conditions. So at that phase, if they can finish it in 3 months' time, then yeah, they can move on to, they can really finish the vacation in that sort of period. But if they need the full 2 years to deal with the conditions, then they would have up to 2 years. So that phase is pretty much controlled by the applicant.
One last question, I'll turn it over to my colleague. Some of these street vacations, some of the requests come from our small businesses. Do we give them privilege on in order for them to improve their businesses when it comes to street vacations?
Are you talking about fees or?
Just expediting the process.
Normally, we try to work with them as much as possible. Yeah, we do pay attention. We normally work with like the council office, the mayor's office, business team, and yeah, we work together with other departments, and we try to, for projects, to try to get it out as soon as
The reason why I ask, I know in the Wilmington Industrial Park, I met with some of the business owners down there, and there's some issues down there, and they've turned to me for guidance, and chairing this Public Works Committee, they've asked if anything we can do to expedite their requests. So I'll turn it over to Council Member Krikorian.
If I could just follow up on that one, the private development group in the last 3 years has been reduced by 35%. So expediting is always a challenge, and obviously with the reduction of 35% of the staff, it adds to that ability to do that. And I believe applicants can pay an expediting fee also to expedite also is another avenue available to you. Sorry, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being a couple minutes late. I wanted to say at the outset how much I'm looking forward to working with you on this committee. Congratulations on your assignment as chair.
you.
I know you're going to do a tremendous job.
Thank you.
Quick question on the street closures. How do you address conflicts within a neighborhood? For example, when there are those who really are eager to have a street closed and those for whom the street closure will be a major inconvenience. How do you address that? Is that simply a political matter that council has to deal with?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. We'll provide the in order for us to even recommend it to you, it would have to meet, it has to be a safety concern, that the fire department is okay with it. But then if there is a disagreement among the community, it does come to the council for that policy decision. So if part of the community didn't want the alley closed, part of it did, yes. We work very closely with the individual council offices, and we'll go to many meetings with the council, sometimes the council member, working together with the community to see if there's any way to resolve the issues. But some do become challenging, where it does eventually come to the council for resolution.
And with the need of the community to pay for the gating and so on, do they create special districts for that sometimes, or how does that work?
It's been a variety. Edmund, do you have a couple of good examples that you want?
Normally, they pretty much have to collectively come up with the amount, and basically the property owners themselves would have to contribute to the cost, and most of the time that's how they are done, and I'm not aware of any city fund or any program that would really help them on something like that.
So it's just done informally by a neighborhood association or
That's
you know,
correct.
just
yeah.
a group of neighbors, something like that, rather than.
That's correct.
A lot of it, is business owners along an alleyway or sometimes that where there's been criminal activity, so they'll make the investment to be able to lock the gates, or in a community they'll band together on coming up with the resources to do this. So it is really an entrepreneurship of the community that comes through on this.
Thank you.
Just on the street closures, how are we utilizing neighborhood councils to share the information and get the information out to our respective communities? Or are we?
Normally, we rely on the council office because we really don't have too much direct contact with the individual property owners. Normally, they will approach the council office and try to convince the council office that this is the community's solution to the problem. So we pretty much not really directly involved with the neighborhood council. We being BOE directly, but normally the council office, they would work much more closer with the neighborhood council on those issues.
Got it. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. And there's no action required. This is just mere informational purposes only, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. City Clerk, item number 2, please.
Item number 2 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Nisario Saseta as the permanent director of the Bureau of Street Services.
Mr. Saseta, please come forward. I had the privilege of meeting you. As I said earlier in the meeting, I met with you and your colleagues, and you gave a great presentation in a short time, and I want to welcome you to the committee. You've done some great work as the interim, and I want to, interim director, Bureau of Street Services, and you ready for this?
Of course, I'm always ready.
And you've supervised many of the major divisions within, the BOE, including resurfacing, construction, maintenance, and cleaning, investigation and enforcement, urban forestry, and administration. And you're also responsible for the successful implementation of the micro Paver system and cold-in-place technology. Did some fine work. And I shared a story with you. And just on my street, the LED light was replaced, and I looked outside and I thought there was a police helicopter ahead above our home. It was so bright, but it was it's a great transition. These LED lights, it's saving us tons of money. Not only that, but it's also preventing crime as well. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want this.
Okay,
position.
well, good afternoon, Councilmember Buscaino and Councilmember Krikorian. First thing I want to do is welcome you to the wonderful world of public works. Public works is great because our services vary from being very complex to being extremely simple. But the common denominator of our services is that they impact the quality of life of
Right.
all our neighborhoods.
Right.
Make no mistake about it, as you well know. First and foremost, and before I continue, I want to thank the mayor and the city council for the opportunity, for giving me the opportunity, the privilege to be at the helm of the Bureau of Street Services. This is a great organization, and once again, doing this for the last 12 months in the interim capacity really validated that my passion is not going in the wrong direction. I really feel that I am the right person to lead the Bureau into the future. I really appreciate the opportunity once again to serve the residents of this great city. We are a great city. And if you don't believe it, just go outside and enjoy the weather. Just there are so many things for which we love LA, and of course the weather is one of them. And I thank you. I thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity. Needless to say, I am very humbled now by the opportunity to continue at the helm of the Bureau of Street Services, but now on a permanent basis. So once again, I look forward to working with you with your staff, to develop a plan for each one of the different council offices. I know for a fact that each council district has a different DNA. I mean, your council district is different than the next one, even if they may be contiguous, but the demographics, the needs, the priorities vary from street to street. So I look forward to developing with you and with your leadership a strategic plan to address all your concerns. To tell you about myself, I can summarize everything in probably 1 minute. I'm not a very, I'm not as sexy as firemen or cops. So the only thing I can tell you is that, I've been with the Bureau of Street Services for almost 25 years now. I started as a worker, as a field engineering aide. I did everything from paving streets, shoveling asphalt, sweeping streets, running equipment, becoming a district supervisor to oversee cleaning and maintenance activities. Then I became a superintendent with a wider range of responsibility. Later, I became a division manager of the resurfacing division, and subsequently became an assistant director. I served under the former director of the Bureau of Street Services for 8 years as an assistant director, and now that I get the opportunity to reshape the organization based on the current vision of the current executive team, I welcome the opportunity to do so. My educational background, I went to El Centro High School. Some of you don't know where El Centro is. It's a small city, just south of Palm Springs, and I became a civil engineer. I did a master's degree in public works technology and a master's degree in public administration. I'm also a part-time professor for LA Trade Tech. And I enjoy teaching and sharing my knowledge with the new generation. So.
Thank you so much. Highly qualified. You have a wealth of knowledge, and your skills, your talent, the experience that you bring to this position. We welcome you and we congratulate you. Just a couple questions. Obviously, when it comes to street services and the ability to be responsive to the 311, to the council district phone calls and such, how do you plan on continue to be responsive to these types of calls that are generated not only 311 but also in the respective field district offices?
That is an excellent question, Councilman. The recent reduction on the staff levels citywide really created an impact on every other department in the city. We are not the exception. The Bureau of Street Services, as you heard in our briefing, also suffered, the loss of a lot of employees as a result of ERIP, for example, employees who transferred to proprietary departments, employees who transferred to departments with special funds. And the challenge is how to do more with less. I mean, our residents are still expecting the delivery of the services in a timely and efficient manner. One of the first things that I did as soon as I became the interim director of the Bureau of Street Services is to create a new organizational chart for the Bureau of Street Services. I totally deviated from the static assignment of staff to a more dynamic approach. That is, our employees no longer provide one or two services. They provide a plethora of services. They're all being trained and qualified to provide just as many services as possible. There is no such thing as one crew assigned to do something. Employees are being trained to perform all kinds of duties. So that helps me a lot in terms of providing the services. In terms of being proactive, one of the things that I instituted right away, of course, is different programs to get the neighborhood councils involved. I strongly believe in neighborhood councils. Neighborhood councils are the arm, the tools that I need in order to get my job done. What do I mean with that? Simply that I want neighborhood councils to become my eyes and my ears. Every other night I go to neighborhood council meetings and people ask me, even my employees ask me, why do you do that, Nisario? You're killing yourself. But it's an investment that we need to do as civil servants to get the communities engaged and involved. The days when government is responsible for everything, those days are over. I think neighborhoods are understanding now that the more they get involved, the more, services that they get in return. I implemented, for example, one of the programs that I implemented is called the Honorary Employees of the Bureau of Street Services. And when I explain this to city residents, the first thing that I tell them is, no, I'm not going to pay you anything, so don't expect a check. I just don't have money to pay you. Instead, what I'll do, I'll pay you with services. You get involved,
Nice.
and what I do, I train them to identify, to develop the eagle eye in terms of public works services. So I organize them to go out. You know, they typically, residents like to take their walks at the end of the day, and I always tell them, you are the best engineers that I have in your neighborhood. Right. You know your sidewalks better than me. You know your streets better than me. You know your streets better than me. So don't keep that information to yourselves. Give me that information. So I developed a new website, by the way. It's been unveiled for the last, I unveiled that website 4 weeks ago. And that website has a special page for neighborhood councils. That special page shows neighborhood councils how to interact with us, how to request the services, and how to get the most out of the Bureau of Street Services.
You know, in that website, something I've been pushing for and talking to my constituents the last several months is to have constituents, residents track their complaint online or track their service online. Is there, do you have any plans on doing that? I want to start it in my district, but is there any plans in place so that when someone calls my district office and complains about a buckling sidewalk, we would give him or her a referral number. That referral number will be posted online so he or she can clearly track it and hold us all accountable for city services.
Currently, we have two ways to track service requests. Through our bureau, our own website, our own service request service lines, and through the city's website. ITA also keeps a record of all the requests that go through to 311, and those ones that refer to the Bureau of Street Services. As we perform the work, the information is being updated on the website. So at any given time, residents can call 311 and get an update from either 311 or us. In terms of putting it on the website, by all means, that's something that we have contemplated before, and we're working on that right now.
Good. Mr. Krikorian.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Saseta. You said at the outset, welcome to us, to the world of public works, but of course, we are all always in the world of public works. That is probably one of the most core functions of the work that we do as a city. And you are literally where the rubber meets the road. So I just want to say, first of all, that from the day I arrived here, you and your department have been incredibly responsive to all of our requests, to all of our priorities that we've expressed as a council office, and I've been very, very impressed with the degree of professionalism and responsiveness that you've always showed. And so I want to thank you for that, first of all. You mentioned your interaction with neighborhood councils, and of course I welcome that very much and appreciate it. One of the difficulties that we're having, I think, with street services, not with street services specifically, but with the delivery of the range of services, is as we go through budget challenges, different departments are affected differently, but we all have to work in a coordinated fashion. And one example that pops up from time to time is when you are ready to go and repave someplace, but we don't have a crew ready to stripe, for example. So I welcome your interacting with neighborhood councils, but I'm wondering more broadly, how do you see improving our ability to coordinate multiple departments and other governmental entities, the school district, for example, and others in your work, to ensure that we're all working on the same page, we're all knowing what the other is doing, we're not siloed, because that's just such a recurring problem in the management of this city. So do you have some thoughts on how we can do better in that regard?
That is an excellent point, Councilmember Krikorian, because historically the city has been criticized tremendously for not having a wider vision, but instead each department worries about me, myself, and I. And I personally have seen and experienced the result of that kind of mentality. For the same reason, for the last 12 months, I have reached and I have touched the other departments, including DOT, including the Department of Water and Power, including our sister bureaus of engineering, sanitation, street lighting, and contract administration, because like you, I strongly believe in collaborating to provide services, because the majority of the services that we provide are not independent services. They're interconnected with some other agency. And typically, we end up being possibly the last agency on the street, because if a sewer is going to be installed, well, we can't pave the street until the sewer is installed. If a street light is going to be installed, we can't pave the street until the lighting and the excavation gets completed. So anyways, I strongly agree with you. I have made, contact with all the different agencies involved. I want to streamline, or any other, better said, I want to streamline and enhance, the communication that we have with all the other agencies involved. One of the most typical examples that we have, for example, is when we resurface streets. In order to resurface streets, we have to go through a series of challenges. Number one, identifying the funding. Secondly, making sure that the right type of funding that we get is the right type of funding for a street. Like, for example, I cannot use PROPSI funding for a normal residential street because MTA is telling me, is restricting me from using that money on residential streets. I have to use that money on streets that have buses on them. So again, it's a series of combinations, including the coordination with over 300 utility companies. The last thing I want to do is pave a street today in your council district and have the gas company cut it the next day. People waited for 50 or 60 years sometimes to get their street paved, and nothing frustrates the residents more than seeing the lack of coordination among city agencies. So one of my priorities, as soon as I became the interim director of the Bureau of Street Services, is to make contact with all these different agencies that we interact with to make sure that we share our plans. Just to give you an example, our sister department of DOT are working with us very closely. They have a tremendous monumental task of implementing a 1,600-mile bike plan. I'm working with them very well. Very closely to make sure that, to the best of my abilities, before they paint the line to tell the bikers that this is where you need to be, I'll make sure that those lanes are in good condition. So I'm trying to coordinate my resurfacing program, my slurry program, my crack sealing program with DOT to make sure that we maximize the city investment.
I think one of the most common questions that all council members get asked is something along the lines of, I've lived on this street for 20 years and it's never been paved, but my neighbor 2 blocks down has been paved 3 times in the last 10 years or something. We hear that all the time. And I think most residents don't understand the magnitude of the paving program and the resurfacing program. It's not so much a question as a suggestion. As you're working with neighborhood councils, I would ask that we do more to inform residents about just how much you're doing and what it is, what the scientific process is by which you attempt to prioritize needs and balance the conflicting demands that you get. I think one thing we do in my office is we put on our website a map that shows progress making and resurfacing streets in the 2nd Council District, and it's color coded, and you can see what's been paved and what's been slurry sealed and so on. But I think the more we can do to get the word out to the public about how much you're really covering, and the length, the number of miles that you're covering, and how you prioritize that, I think that's really important.
Without a doubt, that is the number one question that I'm asked at every neighborhood council or homeowners association meeting, you name it. That is the first question that I always get. For the same reason, on my website, I have a long list of frequently asked questions, and I ask my division managers not to type an answer. No, they personally are responding we videotaped all our division managers responding to these questions. That's the number one question that we always get. How come the other street was paved 3 times in the last 10 years? By the way, it wasn't resurfaced. That's slurry sealing, and not resurfacing. But people, understandably, cannot tell the difference sometimes between slurry sealing, which is a maintenance treatment, and doing resurfacing, which is a rehabilitation technique. By all means, that's one of my priorities, to inform the public as to how big and how great are the efforts that we are making. Typically, when I go to neighborhood council meetings, the first thing I like to mention is give residents an idea of the magnitude of our street network. Our street network is comprised of approximately 28,000 lane miles. That's equivalent to a freeway between LA and New York City with 5 lanes on each direction. And if that doesn't impress people, that's equivalent to a freeway between LA and Paris, France with 2 lanes on each direction. That's the magnitude of the challenge that we have in the city of LA. Needless to say, every single block in the city of LA, we have approximately 70,000 city blocks in the city of LA, is analyzed using the micropaver technology, which is a state-of-the-art pavement management system utilized by the U.S. Army, by the Air Force, and by the elite municipalities in the world. So for every single block in the city of LA, we know the pavement condition. We have the ability to predict the future condition. If one of you asks me, okay, I have a street right here, what is the pavement condition of the street? I can, at any given time, give you the pavement condition of the street, and I can tell you what is the most economical way to address the maintenance of the street. I mean, should I wait 5 years to slurry the street, or should I wait 15 years to pave it? For every single block in the city of LA, we have a strategy. And that's what we present to you every May of every fiscal year when we go to your offices to share with you our recommendation for the resurfacing program and the slurry program. That's what we present to you, so you can take into consideration our analytical interpretation of the street network.
If I may, one last question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Saseta, as we're in these really difficult, challenging budget times, if you could identify one area within the Bureau that you wanted to most focus on fixing or adding back resources to, what would it be?
Well, currently, we are being funded at a historical high in terms of pavement preservation. I think for the last 6 years, the Bureau of Street Services has received enough money to create and tailor a pavement preservation strategy that stopped the historical deterioration of the average of the pavement condition of the street network. Since World War II, the average condition of the network has been going down, has been declining. For the last 6 years, we were able to maintain it at a level of 62, which in normal terms is we are saying that our street network is in fair condition. And considering the magnitude of our street network, that's a tremendous accomplishment. So pavement preservation, although I would like to see the streets of LA being the best streets in the world, the reality is I would need $2.5 billion in the next 10 years to accomplish this. And you, Council Member Buscaino, coming from public safety, I would have to ask you to shut down every police station in the city in order for me to get the $2.5 billion that I need.
Not unless we front-load measure our money.
Right. So obviously, this is a policy decision. So going back to your questions, Councilmember Krikorian, I think one of the elements that we need to address and we need to maintain, and for which we need to be more careful, is trees. Trees is the only element of the public works infrastructure that never depreciates. Bridges depreciates the next day that you build them. Streets depreciate the next day you build them. Sidewalks depreciate the next day you build them. Trees increase their value as they get older. And that's an asset for which right now I feel that we're not doing our homework. I think we need to invest more in trees, because when we have strong winds like the historical winds that we had on December 1st, we see the consequences of not properly maintaining our infrastructure. I think trees are, without a doubt, the patrimony that we're going to leave to our kids. So one of the most important elements of the public works infrastructure that will secure the well-being of the future generations of Angelinos.
Thank you. I slightly mentioned Measure R funding. Where do we stand on that?
That is an excellent question. We had presented to Council a very aggressive Measure R program, and while doing so, we heard a lot of your concerns. All 15 council members, like I mentioned before, you have different priorities. You have different fingerprints and different DNAs. So you came back to the team and you gave us your priorities. So we're in the process right now of finalizing a more prudent, more sustainable Measure R program that will be presented to you in the near future.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. Salcedo. I'm going to move that we approve the appointment of Mr. Saseta as Permanent Director of Street Services and send this to council. Do I have a second?
Well, thank you very much for your support. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Congratulations. We'll see you at City Council. Thank you so much. Okay, so we continued item 3. Moving forward to item number 4. Mr. City Clerk, please read that item.
Okay, and also on the last item, item number 2.
Yes.
The last day, on the agenda, it showed the last day of court council action as March 30th, and that was in regards to the 45 days that we have normally for an appointment. However, since his interim appointment will expire on February 28th, we are going to have him in council on February 28th.
Very good. And also note that there were no public comment cards on item number 2.
So item number 4 is a motion, Labange Garcetti, relative to the revising the street improvement conditions contained in Section 2 of case number ZA 2010-0953ZV, as reflected, located at 1016 to 1030 North Cole Avenue and 6300 Romaine Street, to preserve and protect numerous existing mature street trees.
And before we bring up our presenters, I have 2 speaker cards. Let's bring up Tina Choi, please.
Good afternoon, Tina Choi, Englander Kanabe Allen, 801 South Figueroa, Suite 1050, LA. I actually submitted the card if the chair and Councilmember Krikorian had any logistical questions on the background of the project. So I can just give a quick summary right now if you'd like, or I can wait until you have questions post Public Works presentation.
Okay. Do you want to wait? Okay, got it. Okay, we'll wait.
Okay.
Wait for the presentation. Okay. And Renee from Mr. Labange's office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to you on your candidacy as well as the chairmanship of this committee.
Thank you.
We did a motion on, there was a variance that was approved for a parking garage on this site, and the engineering department had required some widenings on Romaine, Cole, and Willoughby, and so forth. After looking at all the streets, we determined that the widening really was not necessary. They're very wide streets. They have mature trees, and we are in support of exempting those widening conditions. That's in short.
Okay. If I can have Bureau of Engineering please come forward and present. Thank you, Renee.
Good afternoon, Mike Cantor, Deputy City Engineer. This is what's happening is a clarification to the motion that was written. What is being proposed is, it's a very reasonable proposal, because in the Hollywood area, with the Hollywood Community Plan, there are new street standards that will accompany that plan. And that plan is in its final stages of approval. there is really no controversy that exists relative to the street standards within that plan. So what is being done is the conditions are being written to reflect the new street standards, which of course, the street standards are being redone through the community planning process and also through special ad hoc meetings of the Street Standards Committee to address the current needs and the future needs of the city, more pedestrian friendly, et cetera. And so the Bureau of Engineering is required to follow the current standards. So the Bureau of Engineering would accept these modified standards because they're very consistent with where the city wants to go in this area. It's just that our recommendation that was presented originally had to reflect the current standards. And so we support modifying this such that it's clear relative to these Hollywood.
So you support the modification. Council staff is supportive of this. Do you have any questions? Great. So I would, I guess I have to ask, is there a motion? Yes?
Move the recommendation.
Okay, so we will move with the recommendation. And I move to approve the BOE's report and recommendations. And thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we want to do here is, rather than do that, is to move the motion to council, and then give the direction to them to make those revisions.
So I move the motion to cancel and move, right?
Yeah, the recommendations are coming from the council office, and the Bureau of Engineering has we we agree with what is being recommended. The Bureau of Engineering, it can't recommend this, but we can,
Okay.
we can accept it if the council chooses.
So we move to advance the motion. Clear?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Moving on to item number 5.
Item number 5 is a report from the city engineer relative to the vacation of an alley easterly of Westlake Avenue from Wilshire Boulevard to 225 feet southerly thereof.
Okay, got it.
And this item was continued from September 7th, 2011.
Okay, and item number 5, if we can have, again, Bureau of Engineering come forward. Kindly introduce yourself.
Once again, Edmund Yu from Bureau of Engineering. This is a alley vacation request that, again, this is an example that the applicant, they own the property on both sides of this alley, and they would like to vacate the alley and consolidate the property into one larger parcel. And we recommend for approval with conditions.
You do recommend, okay. Is all the adjacent property owners consenting to this?
We have communication from a property owner to the south, and I think that property owner indicate that they would need to have a private easement over the vacation area. And based on that, we have a condition that the applicant has to get the consent from this other property owner before they can finalize the vacation. So we think that
agreement's got to be in place.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one speaker, Jill Sorial from Councilmember Ed Reyes' office. Jill, thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you very much. Jill Soriel from Councilmember Reyes' office. I'm here to speak in support of the alley vacation. We did have one additional condition that we wanted to add for the record to provide community benefit to the area. It's a condition that's been worked out with the applicant, and it's basically that they would agree on a monthly basis to power wash the sidewalks that are surrounding the property. So that includes Wilshire Boulevard, Westlake Avenue, and Bonnie Bray adjoining their property. And they would submit a covenant agreement to that effect. And with that, we are supportive of the vacation.
Very good. So I would move to add Jill's report and move forward with the Bureau of Engineering's report and recommendations. Okay.
Do you have the actual condition? Okay.
From you.
Yeah, then.
That condition, that's part of the same condition you referred to.
That's why we have seen that, and we can submit that for the city clerk to be included in the committee report.
Okay, CLA,
Yes, that's fine.
we're good?
Go ahead.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, our sixth and final item, item number 6, please.
Okay, item number 6 is a report from the city engineer relative to the vacation of Glad Avenue from Clarendon Street to the Northerly Terminus.
Okay, here we are again.
Again,
Mr.
this is Edmund Yu from
Thank you.
Bureau of Engineering. This is another situation that the applicant owns most of the property abutting the street they would like to vacate, and we don't see the street is needed for future access or circulation by the public. So we again recommend for approval with conditions on this one.
Can you identify some of the conditions?
Let me get the actual file.
Oh, here it comes.
We recommend the applicant to give us a map actually outlining the area. That is a technical issue. We want to see who is the actual owner of the property, so we recommend for them to obtain a title report to show the city that who to prove to us that who are the property owners for the land being vacated. And we have a public works requirement for them to close the intersection. Normally, after the vacation, we don't want the street intersection to look like a real intersection, so people may go in there by mistake. So we will ask them to build curb and gutter, to narrow it down, to put it like a driveway, to make it more like a private property. So the applicant will need to do that. And we identify a couple of utility companies like the Water and Power and AT&T. They indicate that they may have facility in the area. So the applicant then will need to work with the utility company to relocate them or to give them an easement for them to maintain the existing facility. So that is something the applicant will need to follow up within after the council's conditional approval. So again, they have to plant trees if necessary, put in lights if necessary. So those are the typical infrastructure requirement that we would expect the applicant to provide.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. Questions? Great. So I would move to approve BOE's report and recommendations.
Second.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. City Clerk? Public comment? Anyone here for public comment? Great. With that, we conclude our first Public Works Committee. Councilmember Krikorian, we're going to do great things, and also Councilmember Garcetti is also on this committee, so looking forward to work with each and every one of you to improve the quality of life of this great city. Thank you, the CLA office, City Clerk's office, the fine LAPD officer, Marco, thanks so much. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.